It's a dark day in the world of Magic the Gathering. The godfather of Commander is no longer with us, and Commander will never be the same.
Magic. I am a wizard! History. I'm an old wizard! The magic historian. My bones hurt.
Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles, my friends. I hope the day finds you well because we have gathered to talk about the tragic passing of the godfather and creator of the Magic the Gathering Commander format. Going by the name of Sheldon Menery, some people may not have been aware of his existence, but his impact on the game is undeniable. This is the individual that is responsible for the birth of the most important format in Magic the Gathering's history. In fact, current Magic is completely warped around Commander. We have seen it become the most prevalent thing over the last few years. So, what I want to do is take a historical look at the achievements, the birth and further creation of Commander and what's happened with it. I will admit, this sort of video isn't something I normally do, and my thoughts are a bit scattered. So it feels a little more disjointed than a normal news video. Understand that we're dealing with something on a different level. This is not your normal everyday kind of news, right? And it's just, it kind of gets you up here in the head, because before we even go into the history of the man and what he's done here, let's just talk about the fact that whenever somebody passes on, there will always be people who come out of the woodwork and can't help themselves but make disparaging remarks. And in a crazy turn of events, everything that I've seen about this man specifically only talked about what he did in regards to the game. There were literally zero attacks on his character. There was no one maligning him, which means he had to be a very good dude, right? The chances that there's going to be nobody saying anything negative about you for real and only criticizing your choices on card selection on the internet where people are just rude as a matter of course, it's absolutely astounding to me. So that is a mark in the man's favor. Now, let's dive in to the history of EDH, which became Commander, and Sheldon's impact on the game, because it cannot be understated. We have to travel way back in time to the mid-90s to get to the beginning of the origins of Commander, right? So it starts out as Highlander. Now, this started out over in Fairbanks, Alaska, with a dude by the name of Adam Staley. So, the idea behind Highlander, the seeds for Commander, went like this. You have a 100-card deck. You can only play one of any given card. You have 100 life. It's basically like, yo, hey, I just took the idea of the Highlander and kind of mishmashed it with Magic. This is from the wild days back in the beginning where there were tons of different fan-made formats, but they weren't spread around, right? The internet back then wasn't what the internet is now. You couldn't just go online and be like, let me learn about all this stuff. There was some people in the earliest days on IRC and the Magic Dojo talking about Magic, but for real, most of the conversation just happened in your local area, and you would have your own particular formats that would kind of rise and fall there. And even the official restricted and banned list made by Wizards of the Coast would have its own tweaks from store to store for other formats, not talking about Highlander. That wasn't like an official store format. I don't want to get that twisted up. Highlander was just we're goofing around, playing our format of the week, mucking about, having fun with our friends. So you have that going on, and that's happening back in Alaska. This is essentially becoming EDH in 1996. So the original idea behind Commander was called Elder Dragon Highlander. And the reason for that was you actually had to pick one of the 5 Elder Dragons from the original Legend set and pick that to be the leader of your deck, right? So the only 5 choices you had were 3-color combo decks. You didn't get to go, I'm going to play a green deck based on this guy. You had to be one of the 5 Elder Dragons. So In Anchorage, Alaska, I have no idea how far that is from Fairbanks. That's where basically Adam met Sheldon. Sheldon was in the Air Force, and so he was stationed there. Now, originally, he didn't actually even play Highlander. He just watched his friends playing Highlander and was like, okay, it's kind of a funky idea. But then later, when he was a level 5 judge, I mean, he might have already been a level 5 judge at that point. Honestly, it's somewhat hard to, even though he's a huge figure in Magic the Gathering, in other ways, it seemed like he was a pretty private individual. So there's not a, like, huge wealth of information out there. So if I get something slightly off, either way, what's important is that Sheldon was a level 5 judge, okay? And that is like that's the top tier, right? There's not many of those judges. So he's involved in the Pro Tour, doing all this kind of thing. And specifically, being a high-level judge and working with these other judges is what led to the creation of this format. He basically went, okay, what are we going to do here? Let's try playing this with some other judges. They ditched the requirement that you had to have one of the 5 Elder Dragons as your actual commander, and from that point forwards, the format just kind of grew, right? Removing that restriction was a huge stopgap remover. And so you have a situation where a bunch of the judges actually started to get into it. And I noticed it as well, specifically because of the judges. Back in the day, I was really into trading Magic cards. I loved, you can always swap all this different stuff. So I was at a ton of different traders, and I made it like one of my missions to know what people were seeking and why shifts were happening in the trade environment and all that. It's such a completely different era. This is before you could pull out your cell phones and figure out all that stuff. But, right, sitting there watching people go nuts over particular garbage legends. And I'm like, okay, look, I don't understand. Can you explain to me why you're so excited about these particular legendary creatures? And it's like, oh, it's for EDH. And I'm like, what's EDH? And I heard about it. And like, on one hand, it appeals to me because I love the whole singleton concept. But also, I initially found the deck restriction stuff to be a little bit, I don't know how I feel about it. Now I see it for the interesting idea it was. But that was my first kind of running into it. I'm at like a higher level Magic event, and the judges are all, what are you guys doing over there? Oh, we're playing this format. So basically, it seeded its way out through the judges, and it would be this big thing that they would do when events ended. It'd be like, okay, when the event ends, we're going to go back to our hotel, and we're all going to bust loose with these commander decks. So, I mean, it wasn't called commander decks then, right? It was called EDH. So basically, for the longest time, Commander was this sort of hidden format that was really big with the judges, but overall hadn't spread that much. It wasn't actually until 2004 that the first article on Commander came out, right? And back then, again, it was still EDH. And that was put out on Star City Games. And getting your stuff on Star City Games back then was a much bigger deal, right? I remember my buddy, actually, the inventor of Double Strike is a friend of mine. So he wrote some articles on that website, and I thought it was neat that I was briefly mentioned in one of those. I was like, hey, neat, I made it onto the website. But regardless, this is a much bigger deal. So you have the first article showing up on Star City Games back in 2004. And that started to put it more out into the general public's eye, right? But the really big shift happened in 2005. And that's when Scott Larrabee, who is basically the dude who's in charge of the whole Pro Tour, he sat down to try out Commander. It's like, okay, show me this format. And apparently Sheldon hooked him up with this deck. Here you go. Here's a Lord of Tressorhorn deck. And Larrabee's like, wait a minute. Lord of Tressorhorn? That's garbage. Like, you're playing with this old garbage from Alliances? Seriously, it is a crazy old weird card. I'll toss it up on the screen right now so you can take a look at it. Back in the day, you have to understand this was complete garbage. Sure, through the eyes of Commander and going, oh, I can do some fun stuff with it, you see more potential. And that was part of the beauty of Commander. And so what happened was Larrabee, the guy in charge of the Pro Tour, he sat down, played it, and from the first game, he was like, yo, I'm in. And I get that, right? Like, I love singleton format concepts. I have my cube, which is like, I mean, if you think about it, it's almost like a gigantic, massive Commander deck with hundreds and hundreds of different options. So I totally get that appeal. So 2005, you've got Larrabee, he gets in on it. From that point, Wizards of the Coast is made more aware of this sort of format, paying a little bit more attention. 2006, you end up with the actual official website for Commander, and you get the rules committee being established. So you had essentially, Menery was like the face of it and their spokesman, but it always had kind of a group feel. The thing about Menery is he never tried to make it about him. It was never some big ego thing. From all the digging that I could do, it looked like he's just been humble the entire time. He's had his opinions on what Commander should be, and he defends those opinions, but he never seemed to belittle anybody or treat them poorly, and basically said, like, this is what my philosophy is, this is what I think you should do, but at the same time, I don't want to tell you too hard what to do, which is why Commander has Rule 0, right? Which is basically sit down and discuss this all with your friends. It's not just straight up, go by this rule set, who cares what they say, they got to deal with it. Commander has always been a different beast. So you have the official creation of the Rules Committee and the website coming up in 2006. This timeline is wild. There's actually a 5-year gap between when the website comes up and the Rules Committee is formed and when EDH actually officially becomes Commander. So up until that point, nobody called it Commander. 2011 is where the Commander name came from. It's kind of crazy thinking that it's been over like a decade now since that happened. Time does fly. But the Commander format was basically named that because Wizards wanted to avoid any kind of names they couldn't basically own. So Highlander by itself is an unacceptable name, obviously, because of the movie and all that kind of stuff. And Elder Dragon Highlander, there might have already been some other products that existed like that. There might have been some deck boxes or sleeves. I'm not 100% specifically on what it was that existed, but it made Wizards of the Coast legal go, we need a name we can own. And that's when Commander was born. And that's when Wizards of the Coast started actively making Commander decks. So 2011 till now is basically the start of when Wizards started paying attention to Commander, and to when the last few years have been Commander-centric in the game. Like, they put out standard sets and go, check it out, here's Commander decks to go with it. That's how hardcore Commander has become. So from that point onwards, we saw Wizards' direct involvement, and mostly when it came to Sheldon himself, he had a hands-off sort of, he would advise Wizards, like they would come to him and go, yo, we're thinking about making these cards, how do you think that would fit into Commander? They would give their feedback, but ultimately never be directly involved. But that all changed in 2021 when he had a direct hand with the creation of Commander decks. So he actually got involved with the design of Commander decks, which is a fun concept if you're somebody who wants to collect something to kind of commemorate or memorialize, however you want to put it, right? There's different ways to look at it. But that would be what you could go out and actually pick up. You could grab Commander decks from the 2021 release, and then you would have something that ties into it. Now, in 2022 was when the Rules Committee was expanded. So you have the situation where you can actually go and read the article for yourself. Basically, Sheldon comes out and says this is something that has been a long time coming, and it introduces the new members to the committee. I imagine there was probably something in the back of his head thinking about the legacy. Because understand, think about this. Imagine this timeline. You play some Magic goofy format that's just meant to be a throwaway, play with it for a week format with your friends, right? And you just goof around doing that, and then you watch somebody playing that and go, oh, that's a cool idea. And later on you go, hey, you know what, maybe me and the judges could play with a tweaked version of this. And then you come up with it, and it catches on like wildfire, where not only are all the judges playing it, but now it's just spreading out wider and wider in the generalized community, to the point where when Wizards starts doing their actual polls, they go, wait a minute. Commander's the biggest format in our entire game. This is literally the biggest thing. It was essentially just created on a lark. It was never meant to be this big thing. But then Sheldon comes along and guides it the whole way, willing to put in his time and his input and put up with all the people who will come and scream at him about being wrong, right? For real. Even I did videos talking about the Rules Committee saying, yo, at some point, I feel like Wizards is going to come in and just take their ability to make choices away from them, and they're eventually going to get shut down. I still do feel like that's probably going to happen one day in the future. Who knows how far down the road. But I feel like Wizards won't always leave their most popular format in the hands of essentially an outsider outside of their control. But it speaks to what kind of person that Sheldon was, that Wizards was like, you know what? Even though this is our most important format, we're literally going to leave it in the hands of somebody who's not in our direct employ. So that is a big deal to me. Honestly, it's a genuinely big accomplishment. When I sat down and thought about it, I was like, this deserves a full-on video. This isn't some little snippet you add in a video. This is a huge deal. So I'm not 100% sure how you end one of these. Obviously, very much rest in peace to Sheldon Menery. Your memory will live on. He apparently battled against cancer for 7 years. The throat cancer got him, and I figure it's probably because some of you kept cramming your opinions down his throat. So just remember that. It's your fault. Not really, but I just wanted to end it off with a joke to try and lighten the mood, because honestly, this is heavy. And this is like my 7th time trying to record the video, because it's bleak and I don't want to look too sad in the video. I'm trying to keep a particular tone. I don't know, I'm the magic historian, but I'm also just a random dude. So, my hat's off to Sheldon. He has moved on to the next level command zone, all right? So, with that being said, I would like to thank you all for still being on the planet here with me. Be kind to each other. Genuinely, you don't know how long you have, okay? So, again, thanks for being here, my friends. I'm going to do a live stream tonight. If you want to come hang out, have some jokes or whatever, you are welcome to do so. Big thank you to my patrons for supporting my channel. And I will see you all, my friends, for the next video where we'll get back to going, oh, magic is doomed. Oh, no!